Well, I guess I'm gonna start. So, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here today. So, I'm gonna talk about how I use Blender in video game creation. So, my name is Mathias. I'm an indie game dev. I'm a French guy, so I hope that my accent won't bother you and that you will understand everything I say. If that's not the case, don't hesitate to stop me and ask me to repeat. First of all, like a lot of people, I'm gonna talk a little bit about myself, introduce myself, because I guess that almost nobody here knows about me, which is quite okay. So I'm a passionate French guy who creates a video game, a 3D cartoon video game. So you have a few pictures behind just to show you the kind of stuff I do. My background is computer science. I come from computer science. I studied software development and all that stuff. And I learned 3D and painting and creation, well, artistic creation, I would say, on my own. So I like to paint, play music, and of course, create video games. So today, I'm going to talk about how I use Blender, the indie game dev style, I would say, if that means something. So a lot of people here already know Blender. You know that it's a reference 3D tool in open source. There are plenty of applications, animated movies, CGI, post-production, lots of stuff, and of course, video game too. So I guess a lot of people here already use Blender, so I hope that you will pick a few tips and tricks and maybe some efficiency tips to, well, boost your workflow if you are creating 3D assets. I hope so. And maybe if there are some newbies here, I hope to show some kind of simple overview of Blender. I just start the chronometer. Okay, just a little talk about the outline. I will try to show you little tips and tricks that I use almost every day in 4 different areas. So first, modeling, texturing, animation, and a bit of level design too, which might be called something else if you're not in video game, for example, like set dressing or decor creation, landscape, whatever. I hope you might find something useful even if you're not in video games. I will try to make quite some demos in Blender. Hopefully everything will go well. So let's start with modeling. So you might know it, but in video games we use low poly meshes because what we aim at is real-time rendering with 3D engine. Just by the way, I didn't say it, but I don't use the Blender game engine. I use some other game engine that I can talk about if you want after the presentation. But I will focus on the asset creation part only, so using modeling, texturing, animation tool, but not the Blender game engine. So to create my 3D models, I have a very low poly approach, and I use some kind of very basic tools, but I hope I will show you here a few minor tweaks that you can use to boost your creation. So first of all, I use, of course, the loop cut. I guess almost everybody here knows the loop cut, but there is some slight option which is pretty handy, which is named the UV correction. By the way, you can also use it with the simple slide tool, so I will show you this. So here I have a simple basic Blender scene, and for example, I will simply create a cube that I will texture. So here I use, oops, sorry, what did I just do? Okay, it starts crashing. Oh, strange stuff happens. Okay, so does everybody see well? Is this okay? Oh, actually, we tried a few minutes ago and we didn't find how to do this. So if somebody knows how to turn off the lights, you're welcome. Oh yeah, sure. Well, except that I will use one of those panels, so I will bring it back. Anyway, so here I just use a simple texturing. And the fact is, when you create 3D assets, very often there are iterations. You know, you start modeling, then you texture it, then you want to change the model, and you want to maybe change the texture. And it's all backward and forward iteration. So once you have textured a model, sometimes it's kind of a pain to remodel it because you will mess up all the UV mapping. So a nice option here, for example, if I want to add a loop cut here, you see that the default behavior is that it will stretch the texture if I move the new loop cut I've just created. So this sometimes is cool to create deformation if you want to have a very cartoonish stuff, which is usually what I do, but sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you want, I will just delete this one and create another one. And you can just check here the simple correct UV map. And then when you slide, it will automatically recompute the good UV map, which is pretty handy when you are modifying a model which is already textured. Of course, this is limited to the, we'll say, clean topology when you can use loop cuts. You can't always use this, but actually it works also with the knife tool. The knife tool already keeps good UV mapping, so this might be handy tools not to destroy the UV map you've already done. So this was the first trick. I talked about the slide, which is the double G shortcut. Maybe you already know about it, but there is the same option with the double G. When you say double G here, you have the, for vertex, for example, you can slide it with the correct, okay, nice. The user interface don't show up. I guess this is live demo. Anyway, you can use it with the double G shortcut too. I also use the trackball rotation. Maybe you already know this. Generally, this is to pose rocks on a landscape or that stuff. You can quickly arrange and create some kind of noisy pattern to just put them quickly in the landscape. So this is really a simple shortcut that I really use often. Two other shortcuts that I use quite regularly are the bridge edge loops and the grid fill. I use it to create architectural stuff. I don't know if lots of you create or use Blender to create architectural stuff, but sometimes you want just a simple hole in a wall to put a window or something like that. And it can be a pain to create it. So a simple way I found to do this is, let's say you have a wall here, and you want just to create a simple square hole to put your window. A quick way to do this is to use the simple loop cut. Then to select the faces that you want to remove and use the bridge edge loop. So you have to find it in the search menu. It's not easily displayed. But as soon as you do this, it automatically connects the opposite faces. So this is oh, thanks for the light. I don't know. Great. Thanks. You have a question? W and E. Sorry. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Oh yeah. W. Okay. Thanks, guys. I'm pretty sure I learned something today. Okay, so this is a way of doing it, and the other way is the, the famous shortcut he just told about. Thank you. Also another shortcut I use quite often is sometimes for my game I create strange shapes for, let's say, a cave or a level which is underground or like this, and you have strange floor shapes like this, for example. then you extrude the walls and you have plenty of stuff around, and sometimes architecture is a bit complicated, and you end up with some gap here to fill. A quick way to do this is to use the grid fill, which in this case is a bit useless because I could have extruded the base floor, but sometimes you start from a corridor you already have and there are things happening all around with holes and all that stuff. So if you simply want to fill up a cap on the top of some kind of weird tubular things, the grid fill is kind of handy because it creates some kind of cool topology, and after that you can, if you want, for example, create pillars inside the room, for example, with a simple bridge loop. Of course, you have to refine it and reshape it, add maybe details, all that stuff. But this is really a handy tool when it comes to quickly block a level design. So this is pretty handy. I'm gonna go to the texturing part now, and actually there are two subparts. There is a bit of painting here and a bit of mapping, UV mapping. So I will try to present you useful options still. So for the texturing part, the first thing that you have to take care of when you texture paint, for example, I will still use my simple cube example, is that when you start with the default Blender scene, usually you have a lamp here. And as you can see, the lamp creates shadows. This is expected, of course. But when you want to texture paint here, and when you use the sampler, which is the S shortcut, you can see here on the upper left side that the color picker changes, okay? But you have to know that the color you are picking is the color of the texture underneath, not of the displayed pixel exactly. For example, if I sample in the dark here, I have the color of the texture, which is something you might expect, but visually it can be misleading, especially if you don't have one light but many lights. If you want a precise color control, what you want to do is just delete the light or put it on another layer or whatever. And you want to use the perfect texture display. By the way, you have to use, if you are in texture painting mode here, so you can, modify the texture, that's it. But you might want to be in texture display and not solid display, because solid display also creates some kind of subtle shading. So this might bother you if you are a texture artist. Yeah, I guess you can make it shadeless. I still use this technique because this is a quick and it's Alt-Z shortcut, but you can make it shadeless, of course. This is the quickest way I found at the moment, actually. So that's it for the little tips about painting. Now I will talk about subtle behavior of the basic UV mapping tools. As I am an indie developer, I always try to find quick ways to do things, to have something which is, let's say, okay. So for always in the blocking part of the creation. So here I will just show you the cube projection. Everyone knows it, I guess. It perfectly matches the texture on the faces of the cube. One curious thing is that if you move the cube in the world and you redo a cube projection, you have some kind of offset in the texture, which is usually not what you want. If you want to texture an object which is not at the origin with the cube mapping, a simple trick is to use the cursor, the 3D cursor, to just save the world pose of your object. Then you move the object back to the center, you make cube projection, and you put the object back to the cursor. So this is a good way to do it, and you have to know that the cube mapping is dependent on the world coordinates of the vertices of the object. Another interesting thing is that the scale also affects the mapping. Maybe you didn't see it. I just scale the object in object mode. If I do a cube mapping here, the mapping is okay. But if I apply the scale to the mesh and then I'll do a cube projection, there is some kind of tiling happening because the scale is bigger. So you have to know when you use those basic tools that the scale of the object and the position, the world position of the vertices are affecting the UV mapping. Yeah, of course you can compensate this with scale. Oh, funny thing. Hey. This is unexpected, at least to me. So, well, you have to know this kind of stuff when you want to quickly prototype. I will also show you the cylinder projection. I guess you already know about this. Sorry, this is here, just creating some cylinder. And this UV mapping is dependent on the camera view, at least with the... oh, sorry, I made a cube projection. Yeah, cylinder projection. With the default setting, it's dependent on the view. So if you want a perfect default mapping, you might want to get an orthographic projection with the side view. So there, the mapping is perfect. And if you have a different point of view, perspective one, when you do the cylinder projection, you get something weird, which might be interesting depending on what you want, but most of the case you don't want this. You can check the options here if you want to align to the object, which is some kind of quick fix. Another way, interesting way of doing mapping on strange object, for example, for organic objects, not simple cube and cylinder, is to use the follow active quad. I will show you this. When you have a mesh like this and you have something quite weird, like, let's say, this stuff happening. Well, this is awful. Okay, gonna make it better a little bit. Okay, let's say you have some kind of tree branch going on here. A quick way to texture it is to use the follow active quads, which if you have already a section textured, it will propagate the texture mapping to the whole object, just like this. And if the base section is well textured with a good seamless mapping, the seamless property will be propagated all through the tube form, which is kind of handy too. Of course, there needs to be a good topology behind it. You know, if you start to add vertices here and there will not be quads everywhere, and the follow active quads won't perform very well. So you have to think about topology each time you want to map something, let's say the quickest way. Is this okay? Not too quick, not too slow? Okay. The extrusion, it's just you select the face here and you just control left click and it will automatically connect. It's a quick extrude actually. Okay, so last thing about UV mapping, I will show you a real level I'm working on, which is it's called present, but actually it's more kind of an messy building. You see, and so this is a level I'm working on. It's not finished yet, so really it's blocking phase still. So the idea is here I have a mesh with two textures, and I quickly want to scale the stone texture that I have here. So when you have multiple textures, an easy way to select the same faces to use the Shift G shortcut and just select the same images, the faces with the same image, and then you can use the famous cube mapping, which will unwrap the object quick and dirty. So here you can see that I have kind of a problem. The texture is obviously repeating, so this is not that good. What I want to do is to have some kind of bigger texture. I want to modify the scale of the mapping. So what I would do first is just scale the map here, but as soon as I do this, you can see that it creates seams on the faces. Why is that so? It's because the building is huge and only the world coordinates of the vertices are taken into account for UV mapping. So when you are using UV mapping here, you can modify the size here of the projection, which which is handy. But the thing is that if afterwards you want to change the scale, the same problem arises. So a way I have found to do this is to make a cube projection with an awfully small scale, so that here, when you zoom, you can see that I have the global shape of the building and no faces are separated, you see? So this way, when I scale back up, I can pretty much scale what I want. There won't be any seams, at least on the faces along the same direction. So this is a good way to, let's say, earn a few seconds of work. And as I often modify the texture, etc. Yes, sorry.
I don't know if there's proper way, but there's a better underrated tool for exactly doing unwrapping along faces without creating seams.
Yeah.
Is it smart unwrapping?
Yes, the smart. Yes, it might work actually. Sorry. Yes, the smart UV project. Yeah. Let's say default stuff. Yes. Sorry, I didn't get it. Yeah, there might be some kind of problem with this because you don't know where is the up and the down. So here, see, I have the texture upside down, which might be confusing. Well, it might be some kind of other way, but I'm pretty sure automatic UV unwrap can be pretty useful in other situations. For maybe not for architectural building with the up-down textures, but definitely I use it on other stuff. Anyway, so cube projection, beam. Here it is. So that's it, I guess, for the texturing part. Let's go back here. Yes, to sum up, just be careful with the object scale and the object placement when you do auto UV mapping. If you are careful with this, you can save a few minutes of work, and when you are iterating every day, this can be really a lifesaver. So now let's talk a little bit about animation. So I'm not an animation guru. I've seen animation gurus out there, so I'm pretty ashamed of what I'm going to show now. Please, please be merciful. So when you are creating video games, very usually you have a file for each character of the game. So here I have an eagle, and there are many animation on the same character. For example, for this eagle, I have a wing flap. I have when it screams, when it glides, all that stuff. So the first thing you want to do when you work with multiple animation is to create fake users for the animation. So I will show you a simple animation file I have, which is here. So it's not an eagle, it's a seagull. Well, almost. Just wanted to get the perspective view. So the idea, when you select here, see I have a few animations and they're still there because I have a fake user on it. You can activate here so that you tell Blender that even if the animation is not currently playing, Blender will not delete it when you close the software. So this is the first mistake you can make when you are working on animation. You forget that, you close it, and you lose days of work. So another important stuff when you create animation for video game is that you want loopable animation, which Pixar don't care about, but when you do video game, this is mandatory, actually. So the problem is that when you want to create cyclic or loopable animation, I will start from scratch, there are many ways. So for very simple animation, you can simply copy-paste the first keyframe to the end of the animation. So I'll just show you this. I will only animate one wing here very quickly, very awfully. Sorry, this way. Okay, just set up a rotation keyframe. Oops, sorry, I wasn't at the animation start. So here I just set up a keyframe, the same at the end of the animation, and some kind of wing flap here in the middle of the animation. When I do this, actually the animation is pretty crap, but it's perfectly looping, which is what I want. Sadly, this technique is very useful for very simple items where you have very simple moves. But when you have something more complicated, for example, when you take into account, overlap, that is to say, sorry, my mouse is doing what it wants. I will just add a little offset here in the animation, well, an overlap. So I'm just sliding the keyframes. So when I do this, now if I just see here, there is some kind of, well, pretty simple overlap, but you have this sense of movement going from the base of the wing to the tip of the wing, which is quite nice at the bottom. But at the top, as soon as I play the animation, it will break on the loop part. You see, this is a problem. So it happens because the 3D. Oh, sorry. What happens with my mouse? Okay. Anyway, if I look at the curves here, what you can see is that if I only look at the, let's say this one, the end of the move at frame 60 is here. But when it loops back to the first frame, we have some kind of jump in the movement. So a quick way to solve the problem is simply to select all and use some kind of extrapolation and make cyclic. This will automatically repeat the animation before and after itself. So here you have some kind of nice looping animation. Well, what happens? Oh, sorry, yeah. Well, okay, let's say I'm doing this. How you set up the first frame? Okay, Bim. Nice, thank you. Okay, so this is a way of doing it, but the problem with this approach is that the cyclic animation is dependent on the animation length of each bone. So if you have a bone whose keyframes are whose keyframe duration is shorter than the other bones, this will be total crap because the loop will happen in the middle of your animation. It's just you have one bone looping on 30 frames and the other looping on 60 frames, and you have something quite messy. So another way I found to fix the problem is first disable the cyclic animation, and then. So this is pretty crappy, but it works actually. It's just simply manually duplicate and move the animation this way. It's a bit annoying because, because you have to do it each time you want to make the animation loopable. So you work on the animation, then you want it loopable, so you have to copy. I guess you can create a script to do this. But what I have seen is that this technique always works. Meanwhile, the cyclic extrapolation sometimes fails. So this is a workaround. It can be handy, so take it. So that's, I guess that's enough for the anime. Oh no, I have something else. Yeah, a simple trick I found is that when you use animation for 3D real-time rendering, the scaling on bones doesn't work exactly the same way than in Blender. So you might have surprises when you animate, for example, a character who is breathing. I will show you this. Where is it? Hero New Design, that's it. So, okay, fail. Anyway, so here I have a simple character that you can see here, and I have a bone which controls the chest. And to simulate the breathing, I only apply a simple scale on the Y and X axis to make the character breathe, which is kind of simple but does the trick. The thing is that I could have used the spine bone, but as soon as I scale the spine bone here, I have a problem, because here in Blender it could be okay, except that the shoulder rises. But when I import this in my 3D game engine, the scale is automatically propagated to all the children bones, which is something you usually don't want. So a workaround is to use what I call a leaf child bone. This is a bone whose parent is the spine bone, but this scalable bone doesn't have any children, so the scale is not propagated to the arms and the neck and the head, and that way the character, the scaling of the chest works properly in the game engine. So I don't show you this now because I don't have time, but this is a trick I found really useful. That's it about the animation part. I think I'm gonna go on with the level design. And I will show you a few tricks here and there and how I use them to quickly create stuff for levels. So first of all, I tend to use a lot snapping and proportional editing. So I'll show you a quick example with how I put grass on the ground very quickly. So here I'm gonna take the, where is it, level design, I'm on it. So here I have, do this. I have this simple grass tuft here, and I want to duplicate it and put it everywhere on the ground. So the simplest way to do this is to activate the snapping, of course, but you want to select the good parameters. So one that I found is pretty handy is to snap to the face and to put the active point of the object on the ground. So, for example, I duplicate and it automatically snaps the grass tuft on the ground, but it snaps the active point of the object. And the thing is that the terrain has some slopes, and you don't want the grass tuft to be midway in the air. So if we look below the terrain, I have set up the active point of the object to be a little bit above the base of the grass. That way, when I move the object, I have all the grass blades going down to the terrain, even if we are in a slope, which is pretty handy to use with the active pivot point. So you can activate this option, which will snap multiple elements at the same time. So once you have a few grass tufts, you can quickly create a few others, and you can move them around like this. So you have to be careful because you snap on the element that is below the object. So if you snap from the side view here, you can quickly make mistake and snap a grass tuft on other grass tufts. So you have to be careful on the angle that you use from your camera. You mainly want to use a top-down angle, which is more handy. Now we have those grass tufts. They are all the same, so it's not very visually interesting. So what I usually do is that I use the proportional editing to add some kind of variety. So here you can simply, you have to use the individual origin, but you can simply add some scale around here. I have a huge fall-off radius here. Yeah. So you can simply and quickly add some rotation to some of the items, add some scale, and you create very easy some variations on the grass tuft. So that's it for the, oh, what do I have? Oh, I have other layers. Yeah, that's a previous demo, sorry. Now I will finish with a real level design that I have. Where is it? Here. So this is some kind of simple cartoonish village, and sometimes when you have a full level design like this, you want to correct a little bit, let's say this window here that I have, and I want to focus on it and I want to work on it, but there is so many stuff around that it's kind of cluttering the way. So a good way to work only on the object you want when you have a huge level design is to use the local view, I guess. Some of you already know this trick. Where is the local view? Here. And you only have the building you are working on. So this is not a very complicated trick, but it's really useful when you have cluttered scenes. Another trick I use very often is the repeat last action, which is Shift R as a shortcut. And with this stuff, you can easily duplicate, let's say duplicate pillar or pole, some kind of design element here, and you can, repeat it multiple times. This is very handy when you have to create street lamps around the street or whatever. It can be useful with many options, including merging vertices on a mesh when you are cleaning, all that stuff. This is really handy. The last thing I use is, Shift R, repeat last action. Yeah. And the last thing I use is empty objects. I use lots of these, and this is, I guess, quite specific to my level design approach. The idea here is that there is some kind of line between the buildings and the trees and whatever, and there are those empty objects. Actually, if I select this one, you might see that it has a specific name. It's called paper lantern. And why I do this is that I want to this point to hold a paper lantern, but the thing is I don't want to have it repeated 200 times on the level. I want to save disk space and time loading, so I only put a frame which is some kind of reference position, and then when I load the level in my game engine, I dynamically change the frame with the specific name with the complex game object I have, because it's not only a model of a paper lantern, it also has some kind of behavior. It moves with the wind, there are some fireflies around, it lights up or it lights on or off depending on the weather, all that stuff. So the thing is that when I load the level into my game, it dynamically replaces all that complex object, I would say, smart objects, and it keeps the Blender file quite easy to read and to load. So I guess I have finished with all that little tips and tricks. I hope that you picked something that you didn't know. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me by email. If you're curious about what I do, my Game Astra, you can go on my website. There is a free demo. You can check it out. Tell me what you think about it. You can check out the blog. I have many articles and posts. So thanks a lot, everybody. I don't know if there is time for questions, maybe. No? Yeah. Oh, okay, great. Well, don't hesitate to come and talk with me if you want. I use Unity. It's not a surprise. Yeah, it's the easiest approach, at least